Welcome everyone. I'm Jini Maxwell and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to Going for Gold. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm broadcasting from the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations and to pay my respect to their elders, past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded. I'm joined today by Zoe Pepper and Nathan Nisbet of Audioplay, whose experimental theatre game Alien Strike won the 2020 AGDA for Best Audio. I'm also joined by Simon Hanna, who won the AGDA for Best Music for his OST for the puzzle platformer Right. Zoe, Nathan, Simon, how are you going? It's good. I am very well. I'm excited to dive into a few days of high score. Um, and I can't really imagine a better place to start than with two wildly different pieces of, I guess, audio design. I thought maybe we could dive a little bit into Right first, maybe to give you
Sure.
a sense of Simon's sort of bright original soundtrack. We could play the trailer. I have to say, even just watching that clip, I'm like itching to get my hands on the game. It's like such an involving, uh, it's such an involving piece of music, I think.
Mm,
It has, you know, like so many of kind of my favorite games, I'm like a big fan of like Spelunky, for example. I love uh, a really, really excellent, innovative take on like a classic sort of genre.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and I wondered kind of maybe to start with, we could talk about some of your influences for the soundtrack and how you sort of began developing the sound for the game.
Sure. I mean, it was so when Daniel approached me with the sort of his ideas, it was he didn't want to go like full chip tune. So but he wanted like the inspiration from sort of like that 16-bit era, and that's sort of where I grew up on, and where my passion for video game music sort of started. So it was perfect. Although I had never really done anything quite like the Right soundtrack. So so what I did was I was listening to sort of things that he was throwing to me, like Donkey Kong and soundtracks like that, and listening to sort of things that inspired me. And I think one of the key aspects for me with those soundtracks was how they were such a eclectic mix of sounds. A lot of that was because of limitations back then, um, but I wanted to sort of take that idea and sort of modernize it. And so yeah, I mean, I always start off a project finding the sound first before I write any music, because I think it's really important to sort of get the sound and the ensemble sort of locked in. Um, yeah, so it was definitely 16-bit inspired, and then we had a couple of more. He had some modern games that he was sort of referenced a bit as well. Um, yeah, but I think it was definitely the 16-bit era of yeah, sort of unusual mix. of instruments that you wouldn't normally consider together.
Yeah, it is kind of, as you said, a classic sound, but not a kind of retro one necessarily.
Mm.
It does feel very contemporary. You mentioned that you had never done anything quite like the Right soundtrack before. How did you come onto this project? And at what
Well,
development did you come onto this project particularly?
so at the point I came on, it was actually quite late. So it was Daniel just solo developing it, and I actually knew Daniel um, through a friend, and I got in touch with him actually because my friend said that Daniel was sort of into coding and stuff, and I was looking to um, get an app sort of my own done. So I contacted him, and it turned out he wasn't, what I was looking for. He couldn't quite do, and then he mentioned his game, and I was like, oh, like that's cool, like and we started talking, and yeah, and so I went over to his place and we checked it out and went from there. So it was really just coincidence that it sort of happened, which is kind of funny, considering where it went. But yeah, it was in the late stages of development, so he was close to being finished, which is really good because um, a lot of indie projects, they can fall apart if their scope is too big, but his was very focused and yeah, and he was almost done, which is awesome because I think it's great to just be able to get something out instead of forever trying to build a magnum opus or something like that. Yeah, so it was really good.
Trap, I think.
Yeah, oh, definitely. Yeah.
I wonder, you're totally right to point out that being brought on early in a project maybe is a mixed blessing in
Mm,
terms of reliability. But so I imagine you would have been playing, you would have been like, you would have had a sense of the gameplay and the art, or maybe even
mm.
played some demos while you were
Yeah,
composing the
yeah.
score.
Yeah, I mean, it was like he a lot of it was quite done, which was great to have a have something very concrete to work off of, as opposed to something that might be a bit more vague. Um, so the whole process was very breezy. It was great. Like it was trouble free, and Daniel's great to work with. And yeah, the idea was solid and simple, and yeah, and it was he had a really specific vision of because there's 5 worlds, and he had a budget for 1 track per world, and so yeah, his his vision was clear, and that was really good for me. But not like domineering or anything like that. It was enough to sort of get started and get going. Um, yeah, and so it worked out really well. Um,
Awesome.
yeah,
I feel
yeah.
like that's such a I feel like people often hear a lot of stories about indie development that are, um, while usually overall positive, much more chaotic than that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So,
No, I've I've been lucky. Like the company I'm working with now is like much bigger, but it's still very relaxed and not overcomplicated. I think that it can work. It works really well when you don't, because yeah, there's just there can be a lot to consider, um, and you can start to really overcomplicate things, especially in like implementation and things like that, where it can start sort of detracting potentially from what you're doing, and yeah, I mean sometimes simple is works well, yeah. So
absolutely.
it was good.
Um, do you, how different do you think the audio would have been if you had been brought on maybe from the start, or if you and Daniel had been collaborating from the very beginning, or is that not really something that you would have been so interested in? I know you mentioned
Oh,
setting the risk aside, that is.
oh, I don't. I like to be like, I'll be brought onto a project either earlier or later. That's fine. I can, you can always adapt to that. It is nice to be able to see exactly what it is that, the vision of the game creators have, as opposed to sort of filling in the blanks yourself. So it is nice. I'm not sure if I think the game was pretty straightforward enough that if I was brought on earlier, that it probably wouldn't have affected it too much. I think that like the turnaround time for the soundtrack was fairly quick, and I think that was probably good because, like I said, it's something that it didn't need to be overcomplicated, and I think that the tight time frame that we had just worked well overall. Yeah, so not much drama there.
To hear it. So looking back a little bit, what is kind of your background in composing for games? Was that something that you were always drawn to, or
Yeah, well,
something that
yeah,
just sort of
absolutely. I
happened
mean,
along the way?
yeah, no, I mean, always. I sort of actually started out doing more film stuff, and I really don't like doing film music. It's not the same. And but I knew film makers and not so much video game makers where I lived, and so I was sort of doing a bit of film stuff, and then I was like, I don't want to do this, and so I shifted gears, which is weird because I grew up with video games, and I much prefer video games, but it didn't. I guess it probably didn't seem as possible for me, and then I just decided that I was like, I took film composer off my name, and now I'm just doing games, and just pushing to work in that field, and it's worked, which is great because yeah. I was not. I did a bit of like composition at university, but it never really sort of stuck with me. Just the whole format of formal education and art, I guess. Except for maps, I did, which was film school, which was awesome. Um, so most of it was sort of some online learning, and just teaching myself. I mean, I haven't been doing it for that long. I sort of would have started maybe sort of dabbling 10 years ago, and at that point I couldn't name a note on a keyboard, and now I can write for orchestra, which is it's been a quite a journey, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no. So yeah, it's been a bit of a mix for me in terms of my journey. No rigid structure or anything like that. And it's only in maybe the past couple of years that I've been like this is what I'm doing. Yeah. So, and I sort of just made the decision, and it's so far it's going well. So hopefully it keeps going.
I wonder, you mentioned that writing film scores didn't really appeal to you as much.
Mm.
What's so different about composing for games versus composing for films?
It's a
Is that too big a question?
no, it's a huge question, but I'll try and uh, there's something. It's a question that I sort of always revisit. I mean, there's more obvious reasons, like in a film, it's 99% dialogue, um, whereas in a video game, there'll be some dialogue, but a lot of it is just gameplay, and that sort of space leaves a lot of room for music and sound, and to express a lot more than I think you potentially could in a film. And gamers will play a game for I don't know, 20 to hundreds to thousands of hours, and so I think the culture around video game soundtracks is awesome, and gamers love game soundtracks, and it is really rewarding to work in this space where there's just like there's just so much passion for the music, because it's a soundtrack for a movie, unless it's amazing and they listen to it for decades. But usually someone will sit there for 2 hours, maybe hear someone's soundtrack, and that's it. Whereas gamers, the entire soundtrack will just be part of their game for dozens, if not hundreds or thousands of hours. So I think that there's just more. It's just I like that. I like the all of that. And I find that the writing for film is just it's a bit more rigid, and like it's something I can do, and and there's been obviously film composers who have made incredible works, but I don't know. I think I like the video games. The music can be not just about the scene, but about the world. I mean, I suppose I could for film as well, but I think more so in video games that the music can say a lot. I hope that probably doesn't make sense. Something like that. You get the vibe. Yeah.
I mean, literally involving, the player is like actively part of that experience. And I think as a result, I mean, it's not just a score to a game, it's a score to a player. Like,
Yeah.
it's like, I think
Absolutely.
it does feel really personal.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I just had one final question
Sure.
before we dive into a completely different project that is uh, equally interesting and in completely different ways. Um, while you were composing the score for Right, were there unexpected challenges or opportunities that kind of arose, and how did you respond to those?
I don't know if there was the biggest thing that I was worried about was the budget we had was one track per world. And so the entire time I was writing the soundtrack, I was like, people are going to get sick of these songs. They're going to be stuck in a world. It's going to just be this loop, and it's going to drive them crazy. So I think that was my biggest challenge. And so to combat that, I tried to write the tracks so that there was quite a bit of movement throughout the piece, and that it wouldn't get too grating or repetitive. And it freaked me out up until release, even after I'd written all the music. But fortunately, I mean, looking through the reviews and things like that, it seemed like everyone was like that wasn't an issue, which was fantastic, because some of those, you could be in a world for quite a while, and a 3 or 4 minute piece of music over and over, but seemed to work all right. Uh, Other than that, the main challenge was sort of getting the sort of unique sound, and all the areas were quite different, but trying to bring out the difference in them, but making sure they still felt coherent was definitely. I had to sort of make a decision on what were the key elements of the soundtrack overall, and sort of make sure that they're in each world, but then bring in some unique instruments and things like that for each world. So that was a little bit of a challenge, and I had to sort of look up how certain instruments worked to make sure I was doing them justice in the soundtrack. But it was a lot of fun to learn, and it was good.
That is so different from composing to film, the idea of having to write a piece of music that a player is going to hear potentially like tens or hundreds of times.
It was. I think I like just before release, I had a little mild panicked to Daniel. I was like, Daniel, there's not enough music in the world. Like, we've got to do something. But yeah, it was all good, I think.
Actually, how many minutes of music are in the game overall?
Overall, it's not long. It would be like
Mm-hmm.
maybe 16 minutes or so.
That's
Yeah,
wild.
yeah. But
For a
I
game
yeah.
that it has like, I mean, it's not a micro game. You play it for a few hours.
Yeah. It's no, it's yeah. There was hence my, freakouts and such. But no, but I did like a very A/B structure of each track to make sure that there was distinct sections so that when it went back to A, it felt new and different as much as it could. But yeah, seemed to work out all right.
I think it clearly did. And congratulations on your win. That's so
Thank
exciting.
you so much.
Um, all right. Uh, Nathan and Zoe, I would love to dive into the details of Alien Strike, a production by Audioplay. When we were chatting before this panel, we were sort of not struggling, but an attempt to kind of define the genre that this work is in was like a little expansive, I guess, because it is like quite an experimental piece. So I thought maybe we could watch just a short clip kind of explaining Alien Strike first.
Let's do this! Cross, go! Hurry! You guys have got to get away! You need somewhere to hide now!
It's like playing a video game.
Yeah,
but
because
you're doing it with imagination too.
Work together to get set up. Get one of the blankets and put it over the chair.
Destroy the pigs!
Audioplay lets you step into the story and be the character that you love. So each player is hearing the audio from their own character's point of view.
Cover your head, Abby! That parrot is swooping you! Ah!
Shall we begin the test?
Yeah, bring it on.
Release the lava!
I will describe it as a game, but not as a game you play, as a game you listen to. Leo, shh! What are you doing?
Who's that? It's Turners!
Give Leo a pooey high five.
Gross!
Sign up at audioplay.me to find out more.
You can come out of your cave now. We won't hurt you.
So
You actually didn't hear any audio from Alien Strike then.
Oh, there's just in the second half of the video. That's fine.
that's a shame. Oh well.
That's all right.
We get a sense of, I guess, the play structure at least, which I think is kind of what's important, because this is such an interesting kind of blend of, I guess, immersive theatre and like play or game design. Zoe, I know you are a theatre maker, and I wondered kind of what drew you to, I guess, writing and designing an interactive experience.
Yeah, sure. So audio play is kind of something that has come out of writing theatre that was designed to be more immersive and more kind of driven by sound. And then it was like, maybe we could extend this beyond the parameters of theatre into the app space and make it a play at home experience. It's kind of hard to place it in a way that's, like to try and distance it from theatre enough so that it is its own thing, but also acknowledge the roots of where it came from. But it's kind of guided play in a way. And we describe it as like encouraging kids to kind of play in an old school way, but souped up with really good audio.
And I don't know if this I don't know about exactly your production timeline, so I don't know whether this is purposeful at all, but recently with all of these lockdowns, I imagine this is exactly the kind of thing parents would be reaching for to entertain their kids. Yeah.
The pandemic has been a kind of an unexpected windfall in terms of it being completely the right kind of thing that even for festivals looking to program work that kids can experience at home, it's been really great on that level. Yeah.
Specifically came about for Audioplay and through Audioplay.
Yeah, definitely not. My work is usually much darker and much more adult, and we made audio works in a theatre context that were for adults, and then it was about, okay, let's adapt this for the audience that it's most appropriate, that the form is most appropriate for, and then we started making work for kids.
You also sort of mentioned pre-interview that, or maybe it was Nathan, I'm not sure, that kids were really responsive to this kind of work, like they're willing to let themselves engage with it.
Yeah, definitely. Did you want to take that one?
No, you go. I'll butt in if necessary.
It's more that the adaptability of so the game sets up where you tell kids they need maybe a spatula and some chairs, like a couple of random household objects to play the game. And that's sort of part of the setup. And it's great writing for kids in that those objects can keep transforming and becoming other things as the game progresses. Whereas adults, it's a little more literal that the table and chairs is always going to be the table and chairs. It can't be a car and then a cave and then keep transforming.
It's like classic imaginative play. Something that probably, I guess most kids grab a stick and pretend it's a gun, but it's nice to egg them on, because I don't know if it happens so much these days because there's so many other forms of gaming and play and stuff.
Brain's definitely the most powerful game engine in the world. I think the things they come up with are pretty incredible.
Sure.
I know when you talk about kind of having worked in immersive theatre, I wonder if, for a non-theatre crowd, you could kind of talk about, I guess, like the schools of thought or the modes of theatre making that you kind of came out of. I remember you mentioned headphone theatre was kind of a movement that informed your work.
Yes, that was kind of like a thing that got popular maybe 10 years ago or so, a little bit longer. That more, it's hard to tell whether I was just attuned to it because I was interested in it, but there definitely seems to be a lot of performance works that used headphones, and there still is now. And I ushered on a show at the Perth Festival, so I kind of watched people play this headphone game for all day, every day for about 3 weeks, and really thought that it just felt like the beginning of the form in terms of how far they were pushing it. In this game in particular, two people sat at a cafe table and heard kind of like little vignette stories between them, and it was like, oh, what if you could make this, really use the way that sound when you're right in somebody's ears has an immersive quality to use it as a way that you can move them through space and kind of give them an emotional experience. And so then it was starting to experiment in a theatre space, making work that was driven by audio with that kind of in mind.
Could you speak a little bit more to the kind of limitations that you saw and how I guess how people were approaching the use of headphones in performance?
Or I guess maybe
unless it's going to get spicy, unless you're willing for it to get spicy.
More that it wasn't, the sound in a movie, because I work in film a lot as well, and sound is just so pivotal in terms of emotionally immersing people in a story, and I guess using it for that quality and it took a while to figure out how to write the instructions where you're pushing past making it sound like Siri's telling you what to do in a story context, that the instructions are embedded in the story in a way that they're emotionally charged instructions, and then it was kind of like learning how to work with the form, in that realizing how much you can control people with the audio that they're playing. So the music, use the pacing and the beat of the music to dictate the pace of how fast you want them to move through the space, or move through a house, or move from one activity to the other.
And from a technical aspect, I think probably synchronization and communication between devices was a pretty big limitation, wasn't it? I mean, to get everything synced up, even like if there's 4 characters in one game, syncing up the audio so because they're all receiving kind of different experiences in the story, but they all have to communicate with each other within the story world, and then syncing all that up, and then making sure that they all play at the same time, and then the story kind of interacts. That was not really a limitation, but it was definitely a challenge.
Yeah, a bit of a mind melt. Like that is when it's exciting. Like, say you've got a 4-player thing, you've got a blanket on the ground that's like an electrified cage, and one team's trapped, the other team in the cage, and then getting the timing really tight where they're going to escape from each other, and making it tight enough that it feels like stressful.
Yeah.
But it's also going to be executed in a way that everyone's going to kind of like get away with it. Like,
I guess that must be
a mind melt. Yeah.
I guess that must be kind of one of the potential pitfalls of working in an audio medium. Like, audio is so immersive and so evocative. I can imagine that would mean that a little, like, if the timing is a bit off, it would be easy to kind of break the spell a little.
Yeah, because then you, like, say in a 4-player, each person is playing their own character. So then but also they'll hear instructions at the same time. So like really basic instructions like handshakes and high fives and that kind of thing. If the timing is slightly off, you've got a real awkward handshake on your hands. Yeah.
Do you find there were kind of particular actions that you had initially written in that you ended up avoiding for those technical reasons? I mean, I saw a high five, in that video. So clearly you have some pretty some actions that require like a lot of synchronicity.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, we've got our app developer has definitely overcome that, and it's kind of surprising. You'd think it'd be quite easy to get phones to sync up to each other, but because they're not designed for that kind of accuracy, it's been a little more troubling than you'd think. So yeah, our app developer has got us kind of down to the milliseconds, which is great.
Nathan, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about your background with audio design, because I'm really interested in hearing a little bit more about your approach to the kind of technical side of this project.
Well, I'm like a music producer, mostly. And I've done a little bit of work for theatre for Zoe before, and for short film. So mainly if she can't find someone or that person falls through, then I get roped in. But I've always really enjoyed the challenge, because often it's a lot more emotive, and it's an immersive thing, as opposed to normally the kind of music I write. And Zoe's pretty challenging. She's always like, this bit I want it to be like happy but then sad, or like scary but fun, and then you're like, oh, okay. So my background is more just electronic music production, I guess. So it's nice to get pushed out of those worlds. I've kind of forgot the question.
No, that's a good answer. So that's totally fine. Do you feel that your kind of interest, your like own creative interests, informed how you approached this project, or did it very much feel that you were kind of
yes and no. It
part
depends.
of someone else's world, I guess.
It depends on the content. Like if Zoe wanted like a full orchestral score, I wouldn't be that person. you know, like Alien Strike, it lives in the world of sci-fi and stuff. So, you know, grabbing a synthesizer or, you know, doing weird warbles and stuff like that, and is very much feels like home to me. And you know, I love film and all that kind of stuff, and you know, I very much pushed it to be kind of as scary as possible, because I think kids these days, they love, you know, you think about the most popular film franchises like Harry Potter or Star Wars and stuff, you know, or, you know, like from my day, The Goonies, you know, they actually got some pretty scary moments. And I think a lot of the time music is kind of a bit too, they don't, well, or just kids content in general, it's a bit too vanilla. They don't really
soft. Kids are going soft.
They don't really lean into the scary things. I mean, adults like to be scared, and kids like to be scared too. You know.
Totally. So, is Alien Strike a little scary? Fun, scary, as you said earlier.
And the kids come out of it like all sweaty, like. Oh God.
Yeah, there's a lot of tension, and there's a few scary moments, and you know, and then there's monsters and all sorts of things. I mean, we didn't get to hear any, but it exists.
When you were playtesting the game, I'm particularly thinking. I hope it's okay if I describe it as a game. I think I consider it a game. Yeah,
I'm done with the game.
Excellent. I like anything that expands the way people think about what a game is, and this does, and that is awesome to me. But I wonder, when you were first sort of testing it, or maybe first showed it to audiences or players, were there things about how they responded that surprised you or that you hadn't predicted?
Not overly. Mainly that how the way the experience was replicated so much from person to person, that people would do the exact same thing and at the same pace, and how controlling the music was in terms of determining that pace. That was kind of interesting. I mean, more so for adults and in the adult work that we have done than for kids, in that, to the point where you could like video different adults doing the same thing and cut them together because they're just a carbon copy of each other. That was quite surprising. And the kids, I guess, as a bit of a control freak of a director, watching them like do whatever they want with it and then like come back on track, but still enjoy themselves just as much, even though they're like, in my eyes, gone completely rogue. But they've had a great. So that's good.
It's interesting that you describe yourself as like maybe a bit of a perfectionist as a director, given that you've chosen, it seems like you've quite consistently chosen formats where people can go rogue. Do you think you enjoy, like, do you find it creatively kind of liberating to have that impulse challenged, or do you think it's pure accident and you've made a horrible mistake?
It was really challenging at first, watching people like, where you're like, oh Jesus Christ. But I think maybe what I'm combining there is like love of audio, but also love that there's always a sense of play in everything that I make. There's always a sense of fun and playfulness in all my kind of film work and theatre work, and that is probably the bit that's built into the form that feels important in that context.
That makes sense. I would love it if you could speak a little bit more to the adult work that you're developing or have developed.
It was kind of just like in the beginning thinking, had big dreams of making something that was using the 24 characters of the Guess Who game board, and then soon realized what a mind melt that was to create 24 characters who all felt like they were the hero of their own story.
Yeah, I mean, Zoe's first project, it started off at that, and then whittled down to 8.
It was 10, and then the final thing was 6.
And I think I did the first audio for that, and I think I cursed and swore and just got angry because the technical aspect of lining all that up was really, really challenging.
Yeah,
like
so,
my Pro Tool session was just like diabolical. And so yeah, I think after that you decided to rein it in a bit.
Yeah, definitely rein it in. It was like one of those things where if you knew what you're getting yourself into, you just would never have done it. But yeah, so we mapped out a little bit like the film Dogville, where we mapped out the floor plan of a house on stage and then kind of populated that with furniture so that you can see through the house. And then it was like a 6 players, 45 minutes. So you've got sort of 3, largely an A, B, and C narrative playing out, and then all the characters kind of interact in real time. And so you've got characters like stealing objects from other characters and having private conversations in one room, ganging up on the other characters. So figuring out the timing of that.
Yeah, because it was difficult to know how long it would take people to do certain tasks, and then unlike kind of the way audio play is, whereas it's mostly one story with people playing different characters within the same story. There was like multiple narratives going on at the same time, and then figuring out when they're going to cross over was a real mind melt.
So yeah, we pulled it back since then. I don't think we'd do that again. But so yeah, since then the biggest we've done is a 4-player, and definitely steered more into it's been all works for kids since then.
Could you imagine not necessarily making work exclusively for adults, but maybe that had a wider, like making audio play work specifically for like a wider age range, or do you just think it really suits the kind of younger demographic best?
Probably.
Yeah, no, we did talk about it, but I guess it's more just like trying to build an audience and a catalogue of work for one demographic at this point.
It would make sense if you had the IP of some larger story franchises, then you could probably get through it, and also the audience would be there. So something like, if I can say, like Harry Potter again, there's such a wide audience range. Adults would play that as well as kids.
Yeah,
and
that's true. And also because I'm not hardwired for kids, I feel like I'm always like pushing the limit on what, like I just did we did a series called Sunrunners with Windmill Theatre Company, and it's space again, but like say they crash land and then they have to like laser saw their arms and legs off, and then like like it's sort of really pushing the limit on what kids can do. Spray anesthetic spray and then hold the other kid down and laser their broken arm off so that they can grow a new android arm, that kind of thing.
Got to do what you got to do.
Got to do what you got to do. So something where with existing IP, where I think that would be a way to really expand the demographic that you're reaching.
Yeah. So would you be kind of, I guess, interested in working with like other, like licensing other IP like that? It sounds like that is something you'd be keen to do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
and we did make a series called The Turners that was based on a book series by an Australian author, a book series called The Turners, but to do something with, kind of like a big established audience would be great as well. Yeah.
You kind of mentioned earlier that challenge of making what is essentially quite a didactic audio piece, not just sound like a series of instructions or like notes from Siri. I wondered kind of if you could delve into a little bit deeper into how you kind of responded to that challenge.
Ooh, I feel like I'm only balking at the question because it feels like something that I've been figuring out very incrementally over a very long period of time. But also understanding that the wording of an instruction is so important in terms of it being really easily understood, and keeping it quite conversational. But I guess it's, I don't know.
I mean, I guess it's about the delivery and the way it sounds as well. So you will say if it's, often in Alien Strike, you're receiving information from like someone at head office, and so you'll make it sound, like it's going through a CB radio, and then you can,
but I guess that the instructions are performed as well. Like they're acted with the same amount of intensity as everything else in the story. It's not like, oh, and now take 5 steps and do this. Like,
it's not like a robot giving you exposition. It pushes the narrative.
Yeah,
absolutely. Would you be interested in? I'm very curious about your relationship kind of to game design, and whether you'd be interested in, I guess, making different kinds of games, or whether kind of this sort of audio work is really where your like creative thinking is at the moment.
I do feel like so many of the skills in writing all these different audio works would be directly applicable to writing for games, in terms of that multi-thread stories where each character is the center of their own universe, and that it's coming from a point of view of story is king. Like it's only really about the story. So I think those skills would definitely be transferable to other games.
Yeah, I mean the most popular games in history normally have the best story, and they're the most immersive. So there's so much crossover.
But yeah, I think maybe just coming from a more film and theatre background, that we haven't really pushed into the gaming world. Like that's not where my connections are necessarily.
Sure. Nathan, what about you? Do you think you'd be interested in do you think this is as immersive as you're interested in getting, or I mean interactive as you're interested in getting, or can you imagine yourself kind of working on other game development projects?
I mean, I'm always keen to see what kind of I'm capable of doing, and to see if, I mean, obviously most of the time it's time permitting, and listening to Simon and kind of his approach to things, it was quite interesting and kind of exciting to try and to overcome those challenges of something that's essentially it's a loop, but being able to make it interesting and push the story along, and it'd be quite exciting to do something like that, as well as the soundscape aspects of things. Obviously you do sounds that are more related to the type of game and the world, and yeah, I mean, I guess I'd be interested. It's all dependent on the project, I guess, and how much time and energy I have.
Totally. Simon, I might actually bring you back in now, because I kind of want to ask you, I guess, the flip side of that question, which is, would you ever be interested in kind of making music or designing sound for a live performance, or a kind of, particularly if it was responsive?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't like strike any sort of potential, off my list, except for, film, as I said. But even then, like, there could be circumstances, especially if it was like animation or something. But I find the application of music in most scenarios interesting, because, well, music's really important to me, and like, for instance, the app that I'm working on, that I'm developing, is actually like an interactive soundtrack for tabletop gaming for RPGs and things like that. So I take,
that's
you
so
know,
cool.
yeah, it's called OST, Tabletop Music App Companion. But I take
Looking that up.
it's essentially a video game soundtrack that's you interact with on an app. So the dungeon master is the one who is, you know, or like there's enemies nearby, you can change the you know, the music, and it'll actually transition as if it was like a video game with stings and intros and outros and all that. So the application of interactive music for me in any scenario is exciting. Definitely.
I can ask you a question, Simon?
Sure.
Are you
I don't know actually. Can you?
Absolutely.
Are you often writing the music before you've seen any of the content? Did I just give you a brief and then I'll just try and get a start on it, or normally they're like, this is this level, it's not finished yet, do your best?
I mean, it really depends on the project. I always try and get as much information as possible, and I usually want to get information that the game creators are not necessarily thinking that I need, because, you know, for instance, if you're writing an RPG village, you know, track, a game maker might be like, this is a village, and I'll usually be like, well, okay, but, you know, tell me about like the geography, you know, does this village, are they hostile, are they, you know, do they have a religion, and all these little elements that can inform the music. So yeah, like you might have just a brief or a complete stage. I try not to let the, you know, where it is affect my approach. I do find that if the more complete it is, sometimes the more stress I get, because I'll start writing music that's garbage and looking at this amazing finished thing, and I'm like, well, this doesn't work. This is crap, and then the game looks amazing. So sometimes it is helpful to have just, you know, the ideas and some concept art and stuff, but yeah,
Okay.
it really depends. It could.
And in relation to is it right?
Yeah.
Yep. What did you use as a sound source to get that kind of 8-bit vibe, the 8-bit sound?
Do you mean the actual libraries and things like that?
Yeah. Did we use like an app or like a?
Yeah, well, plugins to software. So there's Super Audio Cart is a it's a retro audio library, a sample library, sorry, with with all the sort of retro game sounds, and Omnisphere, another plugin to get the rest of a lot of the other sounds.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because they inform like a massive aesthetic too. They really help the vibe.
Yeah, definitely.
Over to you, Jini.
Please, like, do absolutely jump in at any time, though. I love it when other panelists talk to each other. It's great. I guess I did wonder, because we're coming pretty close to time, I did wonder what kind of work is being made at the moment. Doesn't necessarily have to be in games, but kind of in the like music audio sphere that you find really exciting. You know, at the AGDAs in 2030, what are you hoping is on those lists, you know? Or other, you know, other fields.
Yeah,
like I said,
I mean, it's a tough one because there's so much nostalgia stuff going on at the moment. So everything is being made at the moment, but there are a few, I guess, genres and aspects that are kind of. I know a lot of the stuff is just the evolution of all that at the moment. I know it's kind of a difficult question to answer for me personally, but maybe Simon or.
This is a difficult question.
Yeah.
You could just shout out some stuff you like. That's fine.
Do you mean like innovations and things like that within the
innovations
sort of video
or
space? I mean,
innovations or trends or just shifts you're seeing.
Wow.
Wow.
I
didn't mean to melt your mind.
I'm noticing in the electronic music world that it's kind of like the more weird and just out there it is, that the more popular it's becoming. So I mean, but on one side of the coin, there's a lot of people just doing direct replications of music styles from, say, like the 90s or the 2000s. But then you have other artists which are really just pushing the boundaries, and it's almost bordering on kind of sound art kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, which is kind of really exciting to hear that stuff, and for people to be getting into it as well.
Totally. I think for me, like, it's along those lines, it's really incredible to see, you know, an artist like Sophie, who makes like quite experimental hyperpop, get quite mainstream, like relatively mainstream acclaim that feels new. And watching, for me, another one would be watching indie developers start to work with a wider range of musicians. I know on, you know, the Enchanted soundtrack, Dragon Bear Studios are working with a pretty wide range of Indigenous musicians and Middle Eastern musicians using kind of culturally diverse instruments and sounds. That's so
awesome.
cool.
It's so cool. I love whenever I get a chance to work with instrumentalists. I always jump at the opportunity. They bring something like, because samples are quite good now, and so a lot of composers sort of, I think, rely heavily on them. A lot of it is to do with cost as well, but when you get a chance to work with an instrumentalist, especially someone who's doing an instrument, you know, from not a typical you know, orchestra or something like that, it really makes a difference, and it is amazing to watch them, you know, do their thing. And I wish I could do it more. I wish I could afford, you know.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
I'm doing a panel on writing and recording for orchestra tomorrow, and I just want everyone to go. Like, I just want everyone to go to it and then work with Orchestra Victoria, every game dev in the world. It's so cool. All right, we only have a couple of minutes left, so just before we say our goodbyes, I wondered if there's anything you wanted to shout out, any projects you're currently working on, anything you wanted to mention?
Well, I mean, you go.
Yeah, you go, buddy.
I wanted to the app that I'm developing at the moment. Like it's only an alpha at the moment, and if it's something that, you know, the people listening are interested in, it's I think like I said, it really blends the sort of the mix of video game interactivity and tabletop, because I love tabletop games, but I obviously love, you know, video games and soundtracks, and so trying to sort of meld that together, and we've only sort of just released it, so if anyone's interested, do check it out, because we really appreciate the interest.
What's it called again?
It's called OST Tabletop Music Companion.
Okay.
And it's on mobile phones, so it's really easy to use.
Awesome.
I'll definitely be checking it out. I am a big tabletop gamer, so it's perfect for me.
Awesome.
All right, just quickly, Nathan and Zoe, anything from you?
You go, your music.
If you want to hear any of my music, you can see Nathan Nisbet on Bandcamp. That's Nisbet, and Zoe.
Oh no, really? Keep going.
No, I'm done.
And the Audioplay has a new series called Pooch on the Loose that will be coming soon. Yeah.
Awesome.
Which is all
Thanks.
available through the Audioplay app. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for joining me today. Congratulations again on your wins, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Awesome. You too. Thank you so much.